So the conversation this week then became, and this is actually a further point to that, is that the
Mm.
safe return of fans was, it had a start date. It was going to be the first weekend of October. It was going to be about 1,000 fans at first, and we've seen the safe return of fans in Europe. If you watched the UEFA Super Cup final between Bayern Munich and Sevilla, then you would have seen about 1,000 fans in Budapest in the ground. England, Scotland, and Wales, we had test events in League One, League Two. Blackpool and Swindon Town's match at Bloomfield Road had just under 1,000 fans, around 600, I believe, fans in Bloomfield Road. Probably gave Blackpool the edge. It's why they won 2-0, but we'll move that aside. Scottish Premiership matches have had some test events in Scotland, but that's now set to end. No more fans in grounds. So who should foot the bill? That has been the talking point of the week. With one government minister from the Department of Culture, Media and Sport suggesting that the Premier League should help out the lower leagues. And with Jurgen Klopp responding, saying he doesn't think it's their responsibility to safeguard lower league football. Now, what I will say, because some people have jumped on Jurgen for this and have basically said that he's wrong. The big club should always the strong should help the weak. The Premier League clubs are going to lose hundreds of millions of pounds in revenue. We think of the TV money. But there's going to get to a point, okay, it's years down the line, where TV money won't be enough. Fans have to come back, because that's hundreds of millions of pounds of Premier League and Championship revenue. And they're the two most prosperous leagues in England that get the most amount of money. So should it fall on the Premier League clubs, all 20 of them, to support League One, League Two, and further down National League North and South clubs? Or should the government... Because in my opinion, the government should create a football fund. That's my view. The government should buck up its ideas and just say, you know what, we need to... Because these are community assets. I know a lot of people don't like football and you don't see it as a community asset, but it is clearly a community asset. Football is a religion. It is a community asset. So... Who do you think should foot the bill? Do you think the government is right to say that the Premier League should support the pyramid of football, or should the government step in?
I I believe that the government should probably do more in terms of trying to support the local sports teams, because you said it right. Football is a religion. There are towns up and down the country whose local economies literally revolve around not necessarily the success of the team, but the people it brings together. Because me and you like going to the football matches at the county ground. They do wonders for local businesses. Before the game, like local cafes and restaurants are full. After the game, pubs are full, and the government makes money on every pint sold, So I think the government should probably do a bit more, and because that the name is the Department of Culture and Sport, so the responsibilities in their name. I believe it should be the government. I do believe Premier League teams could probably do their bit, by I think there's some of the things set in the Premier League and the EFL about the transfers of younger players, or transfers from players up into up the leagues. Sometimes you hear stories of Premier League teams being able to buy players for disgracefully low transfer fees, just because of the size of the club they're coming from. It doesn't cost them that much to pay off the rest of their wages. So I think Premier League can do what it can. I think a basic one could be, if you're going to be playing a lower league team, possibly a couple of days before or the night before a game, allow that team to use if you've got the testing facilities, allow them to use it, and then you won't have then you will lessen the chance of situations like what happened between Tottenham and Leyton Orient, where the game gets called off and Tottenham get a bye to a next round simply for Leyton Orient being tested positive for COVID. But if the finances aren't there, they can't do it. So I think the Premier League can do its bit to say, like, okay, may not help financially, but provide that allow access to some of the smaller local clubs to use their testing facilities. I mean, if you look at London, how many Premier League teams are in London, and then how many lower league teams are in London? So how close is Boreham Wood to Watford? How close are places like Bromley, who play in the National League? How close are they to Crystal Palace? How close are they to places like Charlton? If these larger clubs do have the facilities for regular testing, I believe that they should probably make them a bit more open to some of the lower league teams around them, because that way then they can sustain the sport at a lower level. Obviously, the Premier League, will make money despite itself, and they will make money from other avenues. Like some of the big six teams, they'll make money from international shirt sales. I still look at, if you take a look at Manchester United, the amount of money they would pull in just from the sale of shirts, still brings in a huge amount of revenue, especially for how much some of the clubs charge for their official kits every season. So I think the responsibility should fall to the government if they're to help financially. In terms of the COVID testing, which is something which, touch wood, is temporary. It's not something that's going to be here forever, with every luck of every deity above me. But at the same time, I think if you're going to help clubs financially, I think that should potentially fall to the government, because, as you said, it helps. They bring communities together, and when people are together, they like to spend. You're spending money on the money that you gain, the government gains from ticket sales. Everyone pays their tax. Everyone, after the football go to buy a pint, they buy food from local takeaway. The people who then get paid by the club, so like your stewards, your people working the food stands and things like that, they get paid. They pay their tax. So in a way, the government makes the money back from being able to financially influence the club and encourage people into the local area. So football is a religion, and it has a massive knock-on effect on the local economy. I mean, not too long ago, I think it was about a year ago, around about this time, me and you were talking about the situation regarding Gateshead. How would a team like Gateshead, who have had horrific financial troubles, how would they be able to continue their club going, even if they've got to pay the wages of the players, and now they've got to pay out money to get them regularly tested? Whereas you've got just up the road a team like Newcastle, who have an embarrassment of wealth at their disposal, who could possibly lend them the facility to get tested.
Simple. The answer, unfortunately, the answer from the Premier League will be, why should we pay? Why should we pay for testing of non-league and EFL clubs? I mean, Hartlepool, I think, in another example, Hartlepool could definitely work with Middlesbrough or Sunderland. They're big clubs in that region. Hartlepool are, I think, still in the National League, and they're not going to have a lot of money. Darlington are another club in that region, don't have a lot of money in the National League. Probably, could. So I think football needs to work together a bit more. I agree with you and what you're saying there, because it is a community, but football clubs will be football clubs where they only care about themselves and their own existence. Speaking of, I'm just reading an article from the Guardian newspaper, and the EFL is expecting to receive government funding to help avert immediate catastrophe in English football. And I put a tweet out on our Twitter page at footy_fans_show. I'll put it out again because it didn't. because I really want to know which will be worse for clubs: COVID-19 or the bankruptcy of ITV Digital back in the day. And I know we talked about that last week, but I'm going to put that back out on Twitter because we did it this week, but I'm going to put it out again because I want to get a much clearer picture on where the opinion is on that. Also, from this article from The Guardian, the EFL is expecting to receive funding from the government to help avert immediate catastrophe in English football. The money, though, they're saying, will not be enough to keep clubs afloat for the season, but will at least keep them alive in the short term. What happens after that remains unclear, despite negotiations also involving the Premier League in the summer, which is kind of where this all started. With the sports COVID crisis having stepped up, an abandonment of the returns of fans, so there is going to be a small financial rescue package for the Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport now. They've even expanded their name. Is beginning to be put together, and so the predicted losses for the 72 clubs combined. Where do you think that ballpark figure is? It's 200.
I would probably say.
Go on.
I'm probably going to say probably around about 285 million.
It's just around a quarter of a billion, £250 million. All 72 clubs are set to lose £250 million. That's the Championship, League One, League Two. That does not take in the Premier League. That does not count in the National League, which is going to be hit far worse. The National League, by the way, set to return next week. Next weekend is set to be the return of the Vanarama National League. Now that, though set in stone, still might not happen. Vanarama National League very clear on their position that they want fans in grounds, otherwise their clubs cannot continue to operate at the level in which they play. But speaking on Wednesday, the EFL chairman Rick Parry expressed his disappointment at the curtail of the pilot program, and this is the statement in full. Following the successful return of supporters to 7 fixtures on Saturday, the EFL is disappointed at yesterday's decision to suspend plans for the return of fans, he said in a statement. Therefore, we are deeply frustrated that they will not be able to continue this work. In doing so, gathering the evidence to show that crowds can return safely to football and become an important financial lifeline for our clubs. Therefore, as a matter of urgency, we now need to understand what the government's roadmap is for getting supporters back into stadiums as soon as it is deemed safe to do so. He did say that I am encouraged by that the government has recognised the need for urgent financial assistance for the sport, and discussions will continue with the DCMS and the Premier League. We remain optimistic that a solution will be found, but we should also be very clear that if it is not, then the outlook for many clubs in this period ahead will be very challenging. I think, okay, I'm gonna, because we've both kind of nailed the government here. I've got to play devil's advocate and say if they do it for football, they have to do it for rugby union. They have to do it for cricket. And the ECB has lost, I think, over £2 million this year so far. So as far as they're concerned, if they do it for football, then they've got to shell out for rugby union. They've got to shell out for rugby league. They've got to shell out for cricket. And then it becomes a very costly bill, whereas if they say, well, the Premier League can pay for it, can't they? So I understand, as much as this is the football fan show and we are both football fans, I understand through gritted teeth the decision of where the government's angle is on this and why they don't want to create a financial package for a deep enough financial package to just foot the bill essentially for the season. Then I'm going to propose a scenario then. If the government doesn't finance the EFL, National League, and further down the footballing pyramid, because of this idea that if we do it for football, we have to do it for all these other sports. Then I'm proposing the scenario that football, from championship level downwards, ceases because it would be too expensive to operate. They just stop playing. Disastrous for me and Tom, because we're both lower league fans. But could you see that happening?
I mean, it's a very scary route to think about taking, especially like we said earlier, how, local football teams can be the lifeblood of communities, I think ceasing it all together would probably worse than letting it continue on its current path. Because then if you're ceasing all the leagues, clubs still have players to pay, they can't really, I doubt a lot of clubs can have the financial power to, pay off the remainder of players' contracts. And it'll be tough, because if all football ceases, then again, local communities suffer. All the way down from your local teams, where they're populated by a few hundred to a few thousand, up to tens of thousands, ceasing all, and then it's a strange proposition, because what we're essentially suggesting is, do we just essentially stop all non-profitable football?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all right, the Premier League brings in the most money, through TV revenue, sponsorships, and shirt sales as well. But at the same time, you've got to think about the various, supporters trusts out there that form a massive part of the community in some of the smaller local areas where have smaller teams. So like places like, Forest Green Rovers, who are based in Nailsworth, they may not be the most profitable, but they bring a community together, a community of fans. And more often than not, you find that a fair few lower league teams can fairly easily sell out their own grounds. I think to cease football would be quite a dramatic. I don't want to use the phrase overreact, because I can understand the reasoning as to why ceasing football would be a good idea, just for the safety of everybody involved. But at the same time, I understand the need for football, especially, I mean, if you look at COVID, if you look at the mental health implications it's had on people who haven't been able to go out and do the things they love a lot of the time. I mean, everyone will, admit to you that football was a distraction. It's a distraction from all the woes of the world and whatever you're going through at the moment. For those 90 minutes, you're focused on that game, and you're shouting, or you're cheering, or you're crying, or whatever. So to take that escape away from a good chunk of people who rely on football, maybe it may be one of their only passions, if not the to take it away and say we're going to stop all football that doesn't make us money. Again, it just re-emphasizes the idea that the fans are not as valued as much as the big sponsors that come in for the clubs. It kind of says to the fans, okay, you don't make us money anymore, so we're just gonna shut up shop. So I would say one of the things that I would propose, which I think the EFL's already done, because I know that the reason why EFL football doesn't get streamed or any live match coverage in the UK is due to certain television rights and deals and things like that. So the way the EFL works, iFollow, where you can actually watch a stream of the game for like a tenner or something like that. I think they need to open that up not only to more teams, but also to various platforms as well. So that they can have like local broadcasters broadcast live coverage of each game. I think on Swindon Town's iFollow, you can watch the full game for £10. I mean, ultimately, and to be fair, that's cheaper than a match ticket. I mean, it's, but then again, it's working out how much of that £10 that you're spending actually goes back to the probably about up to just over £9 of that actually goes to the EFL. And then you've also got the other drop side of that is, majority of the season ticket holders are lifelong fans. We're talking people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. How are they going to try and navigate? How are they going to try and navigate a streaming site? So I would say not cease football altogether, but to find a new way of trying to get football into people's homes.
Yeah.
Because even while we still got
No, go on.
So even with the rule of 6 in place, you have 5 other mates around your house, all socially distanced, watching the football. You order a takeaway. That takeaway's just made money off of fans getting together. It may not be in the ground, but they still do it. So they need to look at alternatives, and I've never truly understood the reason why the TV deal rights forbid of EFL football on a Saturday at 3:00, because I think that's something that's quite archaic and may have to change in order for lower league football to survive. They need to rework the system to find a way to get football back into people's homes, because if this virus doesn't go away, you'll probably see more than half of the lower league teams. You'll see more of what happened to Bury. More teams being expelled from the Football League because they can't manage their finances. Which would kind of be, dirt in the face of all those clubs who have been told to fend for themselves by the EFL, then getting expelled because they can't manage their finances because the EFL haven't done enough to try and find new ways of bringing football to the fans. Because I think if pay £10 for a stream of a match, I'd be all over that. You can sit and watch it from the comfort of you're not queuing up for ages, you're not around people, and even letting them into the stands. I know it's difficult to try and get football fans in stands to act responsibly. The first reaction, the first instinct to when you score is to hug the nearest bloke to you. But if I know football fans, after you've had a few bovrils and a pie, the last thing you want to do is having to walk 2 meters to hug the nearest bloke. I think by the time you've identified someone who probably doesn't look ill and then want to go hug them, the goal's already been ruled offside, and you just sit back down in your seat. So I think they need to not. Shutting down football, I think, terrible idea, because it takes a lot of the community spirit away and a lot of the lifeblood and a lot of the economic benefits that football brings, definitely to smaller communities. So that's where I think it becomes the responsibility of the EFL to find alternative ways of bringing football. And one of those ways is through live streaming services. The modern world is digital. If you can't work a live stream yourself, no doubt you've got a younger family member who can help you.
I just got to interrupt you there because it's full time and it's Burnley 0, Southampton 1. Danny Ings with the only goal, and guess what? He's man of the match as well because of that goal. Burnley 0, Southampton 1. So former Burnley man winning it for Southampton. Ralph Hasenhuttl gets his first win of the season, and Sean Dyche and Burnley got a few transfer targets they're trying to sign. Based on the streaming service, I think they're you'll probably know this more than me. They have a streaming service in place for season ticket holders at the moment, but you do have to again pay up front for that. And I think in regards to streaming, Sky Sports own the rights for the entire EFL, but they primarily show the Championship. And if you watch the highlight shows on Quest, it's primarily focused and geared towards the championship. It's what always annoyed me about the Football League show when it was on BBC. It's what annoyed me about it when it was on Channel 5. They always gear it to the championship, and if you're a League 1, League 2 supporter, then you've got to wait until midnight to actually watch your team. It's a tough one because I understand both points of view. The government can't shell out money, but we don't want more. Macclesfield Town have already bitten the dust. Yes, they had problems going back to January of 2019. That's when their problems started to emerge. But Macclesfield Town have already bitten the dust, and COVID hasn't helped. We had Bury Football Club just before that bite the dust. They still exist. I said this last week. They still technically exist as a business. They are just a shell. But I could just see more clubs going into administration, more... and we don't know what's happening with Wigan yet. We don't know... we know now what's happening to Charlton. We don't know what's happening with Wigan. Sheffield Wednesday are good financially. They just got docked points. I agree. There should be a streaming service. Yeah, go on.
I think for the time being, if they were going to temporarily suspend anything, is suspend the points deduction system for going into administration, because an awful lot more clubs that's going. Because then what you're doing is you're deducting points. It may not have a direct effect on the finances, but you're already setting an obstacle in place for that team to go down, and then their salary cap becomes lower, and the revenue that they generate becomes low automatically as well. So I think that getting rid of that points deduction system temporarily just for this COVID system, because a lot of clubs are going to struggle, and then what you're essentially doing is putting another obstacle in the way. So it's not necessarily saying, okay, we're going to fine you for going into administration. That's bad. Coordinating a series of events where where financially they may or may not struggle. To me, that's an entirely different kind of evil. You're saying like, oh, I didn't. It'd be like if I said if I said I could walk up to someone, if I punch, if I, attack them, kill them or something like that. Apologies for using such language on your streams. But then what would be worse if I just went up to someone and killed someone, or I carefully manipulated certain events so that your harm may come to your person. It may or may not happen, but I've manipulated events to that point. That's something a lot worse in my view. You're deducting points from a team who can't manage the finances for something that's not in their control, and you're then deducting points for teams who can't manage their finances that's not in their control, and they've had no financial support from either the government or the EFL, who are supposed to be the overruling regulatory bodies of this. They're being told to fend for themselves, and then when left to fend for themselves, go into administration, and then the all-powerful EFL deducting them points, which will impact them financially in the future. Again, and that's something I think that if there's anything that needs to cease or be suspended, it's the points deduction system.